No civilized species would feed this to a child. The sentence rolled across the Galactic Council hall in a dozen translated languages, and for one clean, ugly second, Ryan Keller forgot he was supposed to be polite. He stood at the end of the diplomatic banquet table with his hands resting on a silver thermal case from Earth, the kind you could buy at any big box store back home if you needed to keep ribs warm for a church picnic or a Little League fundraiser. Around him, 300 alien delegates leaned away like he had opened a bomb. Red warning lights flashed across the black glass table. A soft alarm pulsed through the hall. On the central display, the council's toxicology scanner listed the contents of Ryan's dinner in bright emergency text. Neurological irritant, cardiovascular stimulant, corrosive organic acid, sodium chloride crystals, carbonized animal tissue, bacterial fermentation traces. Ryan stared at the list, then down at the tray. Barbecue ribs, cornbread, pickles, a little bottle of hot sauce from Louisiana, black coffee in a sealed cup. Nothing fancy, nothing military, just food. Counselor Marcus Vale, tall, silver-robed, and smiling like a man who had planned every second of this humiliation, turned toward the broadcast lenses floating over the table. For the record, he said, the Terran delegation attempted to introduce hazardous biological material into a formal meal. A few delegates laughed under their breath. Others made small gestures of disgust. Ambassador Claire Bennett, seated 2 chairs away, kept her face calm, but Ryan saw her jaw tighten. She had warned him before they entered the hall. Keep your head down. Let them talk. Do not give them a show. Ryan had agreed because he was not a soldier, not a senator, not some flag-waving hero from a recruitment poster. He was a food logistics specialist from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, 36 years old, with a bad knee from slipping on a freezer floor and a father who still ran a roadside diner where the coffee was strong enough to take paint off a bumper. Ryan's job was simple. Make sure the Earth delegation could eat something that would not make them sick. Smile when insulted. Say yes, ma'am. Say no, sir. Get through the night. But then Vale had looked at the tray like it was evidence of a crime and said no civilized species would feed this to a child. Ryan thought of his mother wrapping leftover cornbread in foil after Sunday dinner. He thought of kids at county fairs with barbecue sauce on their cheeks, laughing with paper cups of lemonade in their hands. He thought of his nephew asking for extra pickles on a burger and grinning like he had won the lottery. For the first time all evening, Ryan lifted his eyes. Dr. Vivian Soar, the council toxicologist, stood beside the scanner with her long blue-silver fingers folded against her tablet. She was not laughing. Her face had gone still in the way doctors look still when numbers stop making sense. Mr. Keller, she said carefully, her translator smoothing her voice into cool American English, step away from the tray. Your species may not understand the exposure risk. Ryan almost smiled at that. Almost. Instead, he pulled out the chair in front of him. The sound of its legs against the polished floor carried farther than it should have. Claire turned slightly. Ryan, she said, low enough that only he could hear. You do not have to do this. He looked at the food, then at the cameras, then at the room full of people waiting for Earth to be embarrassed into silence. His throat felt dry. His hands were steady only because he made them steady. Yes, ma'am, he said. I do. Then Ryan Keller sat down, unfolded his napkin, picked up the first rib, and took a bite while the entire galaxy watched. The first bite tasted like home, which was probably the strangest part. Ryan had expected the room to disappear, or for his nerves to take over, or for the barbecue to taste like metal because every camera in the council hall was pointed at his face. Instead, the sauce hit first, smoky and sweet, with a little heat at the back of his tongue. Brown sugar, pepper, vinegar, paprika, the same balance his father used to argue about with customers at Keller's Diner back in Cedar Rapids. Ryan chewed slowly because if he rushed, they would think he was performing. If he hesitated, they would think they had scared him. So he did what his father had taught him when he was 12 years old and too nervous to carry plates through a packed lunch rush. Keep your shoulders loose. Breathe through your nose. Do the job in front of you. Across the table, Dr. Vivian Soar watched the monitor like it had insulted her personally. The red warning text kept updating, but Ryan's vitals stayed steady. Heart rate a little high. Blood pressure normal enough. Stress markers elevated, but nothing worse than a guy stuck in traffic on Interstate 80. Vivian looked from the screen to Ryan, then back again. You are experiencing no immediate distress? she asked. Ryan swallowed, dabbed the corner of his mouth with the napkin, and said, "It is a little dry. That is on me." Nobody laughed. Not one delegate. Counselor Vale's smile tightened. "This is not a comedy, Mr. Keller." Ryan looked at him for half a second, then picked up the cornbread. "Never said it was." Claire Bennett lowered her eyes, but Ryan caught the faintest shift at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile. Not quite. More like relief that he was still himself. That mattered more than he wanted to admit. He was not built for grand rooms like this, for polished alien floors and floating translation lenses and officials who spoke like every sentence had been approved by a committee. Ryan was built for loading docks, kitchen steam, plastic gloves, walk-in freezers, and the kind of morning where you drank bad coffee because the good coffee ran out at 6. He had joined the Terran delegation because somebody had to make sure humans did not starve politely at diplomatic events designed by species that lived on mineral paste and sunlight. It was supposed to be practical work, quiet work, honest work. Then Earth became a joke at the biggest table in the galaxy. He remembered the briefing on the shuttle, Ambassador Bennett standing in the aisle with one hand braced against the seat as the ship coasted toward the council station. "They are going to test us," she had said. "Not with weapons. Not directly. They will test whether we can be embarrassed into acting smaller than we are." Ryan had nodded then, thinking she meant speeches, trade rules, maybe some ugly comment about Death World manners. He had not imagined they would put his dinner on trial. Vivian stepped closer, her blue-silver skin catching the red flash of the scanner. "Mr. Keller, I need you to understand something. To 12 species in this chamber, what you just consumed would require emergency isolation." Ryan picked up the cup of black coffee and peeled back the heat seal. The smell rose warm and bitter. For a second, he was back in Iowa before sunrise, his dad flipping the diner sign to open, his mother counting change at the register, the radio talking about rain over the cornfields. He took a careful sip. The council hall went so quiet he could hear the soft hum of the table. Vivian whispered, "That stimulant should be medically significant." Ryan set the cup down. "Ma'am, where I come from, this is what people drink before they become polite." The coffee changed the mood more than the rib had. Food. The council could almost excuse as some strange cultural accident, but the coffee looked deliberate. It was black, hot, bitter, and strong enough that the toxicology display kept trying to classify it as a controlled cardiac accelerant. Ryan held the cup with both hands for a moment, letting the warmth settle into his palms, because it gave him something normal to do while hundreds of alien officials stared at him like he had just swallowed engine cleaner. Counselor Vale stepped away from his chair, his robe whispering against the floor. "Dr. Soar," he said, louder than necessary, "please explain to the assembly what we are witnessing." Vivian did not answer right away. That bothered him. Ryan could see it in the way Vale's eyes narrowed. He wanted disgust. He wanted a neat little speech about Terran backwardness, something the broadcast channels could cut into a clean 15-second clip. Instead, Vivian was reading 3 different monitors, her long fingers moving too fast across the tablet. "The subject's vitals remain within acceptable human ranges," she said at last. "Stress response is elevated, but stable. No seizure activity, no respiratory failure, no tissue collapse." A soft ripple went through the hall. Ryan knew enough about people, human or not, to hear disappointment mixed with fear. Vale turned toward the room as if he could push the story back into place by force of posture alone. "Then perhaps the danger has been exaggerated by our equipment." Vivian looked up. "No, the equipment is functioning correctly." That landed harder. Ryan set the coffee down. For the first time, he noticed Maya Torres standing near the medical partition on the far side of the hall. She was one of Earth's emergency technicians, a short woman from San Antonio with tired eyes and a habit of carrying peppermint gum in her coat pocket. She gave Ryan the smallest nod in the world. Not approval exactly. More like, "Keep breathing." He did. Vale pointed toward the tray. "Continue the analysis." Vivian's expression tightened, but she obeyed. "The red sauce contains capsaicin, a pain-triggering compound. For several member species, skin contact alone would require treatment. The preserved vegetables are suspended in acetic acid and salt. The beverage contains caffeine at a concentration high enough to destabilize the cardiac rhythm of smaller avian delegates. The bread contains ground seed matter, processed fat, and refined sugars. The smoked meat carries combustion byproducts that most planetary health boards would not permit near a nursery. That last word hit Ryan in the chest. Nursery. He thought of his nephew Tyler sitting on a backyard cooler last 4th of July, legs swinging, missing 2 front teeth, asking for the burnt-in pieces because they were the best part. He thought of his sister laughing and wiping sauce off the kid's chin with a paper towel. None of it was exotic. None of it was dangerous. It was family, folding chairs, bug spray, somebody arguing about baseball, and the smell of charcoal in the evening air. "You hear that, Mr. Keller?" Vale said. "Your own meal proves our concern. You normalize exposure because your people do not know any better." Ryan looked down at his plate. He could feel heat rising in his face, not from the sauce this time. Anger would have been easy. Anger would have made Vale happy. So Ryan picked up a pickle spear, took one clean bite, and let the crunch echo into the silence. Vivian stared at the monitor. A second passed. Then another. Nothing happened except Ryan chewing. He swallowed, looked at Vale, and said quietly, "My grandmother made these in mason jars." Vale blinked. "That is your defense." Ryan wiped his fingers on the napkin. "No, sir. That is my point." Claire Bennett finally stood, smooth as a door closing. "Counselor, you invited Earth to a cultural banquet, then treated our culture like a crime scene." Her voice was calm, but every word had weight. "Be very careful where you take this next." For the first time all night, Vale did not answer immediately, because Ryan had reached for the hot sauce. Ryan unscrewed the little bottle of hot sauce like he was sitting at a kitchen table instead of the center of a galactic tribunal. The label was plain white with red lettering, the kind of small batch brand you found at a farmer's market, made by somebody who cared too much about peppers and not enough about warning labels. The smell hit the air sharp and bright. Several delegates recoiled at once. One aquatic representative sealed the front of his breathing collar with a wet click. Another pushed his chair back so fast the legs scraped against the floor. Dr. Vivian sore raised one hand. "Mr. Keller, stop." Ryan paused with the bottle tilted over the rib. His thumb rested on the cap. His face stayed calm, but his stomach tightened. Not from fear of the sauce. From the feeling that every ordinary thing about him had been dragged under a spotlight and called ugly. "Doctor," he said, "is this dangerous to anyone if I keep it on my own plate?" Vivian checked the scanner, then looked almost irritated that the truth did not help her. "Not at that distance." "Then I am going to eat my dinner." Counselor Vale's voice cut in. "You are going to make a spectacle of yourself." Ryan looked at him. "No, sir. You already did that." The room went still. Claire Bennett did not move, but Ryan felt her attention sharpen beside him. Maya Torres, across the hall, pressed 2 fingers lightly against the side of her medical tablet, watching his vitals climb with his temper. Ryan knew the numbers were not dangerous. He also knew anger could make a man sloppy, and sloppy was what Vale wanted. So he poured one thin line of sauce across the meat. Nothing dramatic. Nothing foolish. Just enough to taste. Back home, his father would have called that polite. Vivian's scanner immediately changed color again. New warnings stacked over old warnings. Pain receptor activator. Mucosal irritant. Predatory plant defense compound. Ryan almost laughed at that last one. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded like something his father would put on a t-shirt. He could hear the old man in his head, leaning over the diner counter, saying, "Plants fight back too, son. That is why God gave us ranch dressing." Ryan took the bite. The heat bloomed across his tongue, warm and familiar, enough to make his eyes water if he let it. He did not let it. He chewed slowly, stared down at the plate, and reminded himself that this was not about proving he could handle spice. It was about the way Vale had said children, like every kitchen on Earth was a place of neglect, like every mother packing lunch before school had been too primitive to know better. Ryan swallowed. His throat burned a little. His eyes stayed clear. Vivian stepped closer, no longer hiding her concern. "Pain response is active," she said softly. "But you are choosing to continue. That is usually how hot sauce works. You experience discomfort on purpose?" Ryan took a drink of coffee. "Sometimes. Makes the food better." A murmur passed through the chamber, not laughter this time. Confusion. Unease. Vivian looked at him as if he had opened a door onto a room she had not known existed. "Your species adds pain to meals for flavor." Ryan wiped his mouth with the napkin. "We add a lot of things for flavor." Vale snapped. "That is not refinement. That is barbarism dressed as tradition." Claire finally leaned forward, her voice smooth and cold. "Counselor, Earth has listened patiently while you insulted our biology, our food, and our families. I recommend you stop before you insult our restraint." Vale turned on her. "Is that a threat, Ambassador?" Ryan set the rib bone down carefully, cleanly, without a sound. Then he looked up. "No," he said. "That was manners." For a moment, nobody spoke. Even the translation lenses seemed to hover more quietly above the table. Vivian looked from Ryan to the plate, then to the scanner, and Ryan saw the first real crack in her certainty. Not fear of a monster. Not yet. Something deeper. The fear of realizing the map she trusted had been wrong from the beginning. Then Ryan reached for the cornbread, split it open with his fingers, and added one more drop of sauce. By the time Ryan finished the sauce cornbread, the council hall had stopped feeling like a banquet and started feeling like a waiting room outside a bad diagnosis. The servers no longer moved between the tables. The floating cameras had lowered until their glass eyes hovered just above the centerpiece lights. Across the room, medical drones stood ready with soft blue indicators glowing along their sides, each one programmed to respond to a crisis that refused to arrive. Ryan could feel sweat at the back of his neck now, but that was normal. Hot sauce did that. So did being treated like a public health disaster by several hundred people in formal robes. Maya Torres stepped closer to the medical boundary and spoke into her calm, her voice steady but tight. "His vitals are elevated, but not dangerous. He is nervous. Anybody would be nervous." Vivian turned toward her. "His pain receptors are active." Maya gave her a look that Ryan recognized instantly from emergency rooms and airport delays and school principals who had lost patience. "Yes, doctor." He ate hot sauce. Vivian looked back at Ryan, searching his face as if she expected a delayed collapse hidden behind his expression. Ryan picked up a pickle and pointed it gently toward her. Not rude, just tired. "You keep waiting for me to fall over." Vivian did not deny it. "The model says you should be in significant distress." "The model ever been to a tailgate?" "I do not know that word." "Then the model has gaps." A few of the younger delegates exchanged uneasy glances. That was the first time Ryan felt the room shift away from mockery and into something quieter. The jokes were drying up. The smirks were fading. Nobody wanted to admit it yet, but they were watching a man do something impossible according to their best science, and he was doing it with a paper napkin tucked beside his plate. Counselor Vale sensed the shift too, and it made him sharper. "Enough of this performance. Dr. Soar, issue a formal hazard ruling." Vivian stood very still. "On what grounds?" Vale turned slowly. "On the grounds that we have all seen the scan." "The scan proves the compounds are hazardous to many species," Vivian said. "It does not prove they are hazardous to him." Vale's face hardened. "Do not become sentimental over a mammal with table manners." Ryan felt Claire move before she spoke. There was something about Ambassador Bennett when she got quiet that made even Ryan sit a little straighter. "Careful, counselor." Vale ignored her. "This is precisely the problem with Earth. You confuse survival with dignity. You mistake tolerance for culture. A species born in filth learns to chew filth and calls it heritage." That one hit different. Ryan looked down at his hands. They were broad, a little rough around the knuckles, clean but never quite free of the small scars that came from kitchen work. Grease burns. Freezer cuts. A thumb once caught under a crate of canned tomatoes. Nothing dramatic. Just the price of feeding people for years. He thought of his dad waking up at 4 in the morning to prep biscuits. His mother sending casseroles to neighbors after storms. Firefighters drinking coffee in paper cups after long nights. Nurses eating vending machine snacks because lunch breaks did not always happen. Humans did not eat because they were filthy. They ate because life was hard, and food made it bearable. Ryan lifted the coffee again and took one slow sip. His voice, when it came, was not loud. "My mother made dinner for people who could not pay." The hall went quiet enough to hear the cup touch the table. "My father fed truckers at midnight and kids after ball games, and old men who sat at the counter because they did not want to eat alone. So you can call me whatever you want, counselor. But do not stand there in a room full of cameras and call that filth." For the first time, Vivian looked away from the monitor and looked at Ryan himself. Not his numbers. Not the chemical alerts. Him. Then the scanner gave a soft chime, and a new line appeared on the display. "Human metabolic adaptation confirmed." Vivian read it once, then again, and all the colors seemed to drain from the room without the lights changing at all. Vivian read the line on the display as if it had appeared in a language she did not speak. Human metabolic adaptation confirmed. The Council toxicology system did not offer opinions. It did not care about pride, politics, or Marcus Vale's expression collapsing by degrees under the soft red light. It only measured. It only compared. And now it had compared Ryan Keller against the food on his tray and reached a conclusion that made the whole room feel smaller. Vivian touched the screen and expanded the report. New data opened above the table in floating columns. Gastric acidity far beyond the galactic median. Liver enzyme response accelerating. Pain receptor activation controlled without systemic failure. Microbiome activity unusually aggressive. Stress response elevated but organized. Ryan did not understand half of it, but he understood the way Vivian's shoulders changed. She had stopped looking like a prosecutor. She looked like a scientist standing too close to a storm. "Doctor," Vale said, his voice tight, "summarize that in terms the assembly can use." Vivian did not look at him. The original model was incomplete. "That is not a summary. It is the truth." A murmur moved through the hall, low and nervous. Ryan sat with one hand around his coffee cup, suddenly aware of how tired he was. The anger that had carried him through the last few minutes had begun to drain, leaving behind something heavier. Embarrassment, maybe. Not because he had eaten. Because everyone was staring at the private machinery of his body like it belonged to the council now. Maya seemed to notice. She stepped forward until the medical boundary lights warned her to stop. "Ryan," she said, "you doing all right?" He gave her a small nod. "I have had worse Tuesdays." "That is not a medical answer." "No, ma'am." "Give me one." He breathed in, checked himself the way people do when they are trying not to make trouble. Mouth hot. Stomach fine. Hands steady enough. Pride bruised. "I am okay," he said. "I am mad, but I am okay." Maya nodded once, accepting that both parts mattered. Vivian heard it too. Ryan could tell. Something shifted in her face when he admitted anger without letting it drive the room. Maybe that was the part her data had no category for. Vale moved toward the display, trying to reclaim it. "You are saying Earth organisms are chemically resistant." Vivian finally turned. "No, I am saying your classification is lazy." The hall froze. Vale stared at her. "Repeat that." Vivian's voice stayed even, but it carried now. The Council database labeled common Terran compounds as poison because it evaluated them against non-Terran biology. It assumed the galactic average was the civilized standard. That was not science. That was arrogance with a laboratory coat. Ryan lowered his eyes to his plate, not wanting to smile at the wrong time. Claire Bennett did not have that problem. She stood perfectly still, but her satisfaction was almost visible. Vale's mouth opened, then closed. He had expected Ryan to be the difficult one. He had not expected his own expert to step off the script. Vivian turned back to the display and highlighted the rows one by one. Capsaicin causes pain, but humans use controlled discomfort as flavor. Caffeine stresses the cardiovascular system, but within human limits, it improves alertness. Fermented foods contain active microbial histories, yet human digestive ecosystems negotiate with them instead of failing. Acid, smoke, salt, heat, bitter alkaloids, all of it looks hazardous from the outside. She looked at Ryan then, really looked at him. But for them, it is cuisine. That word landed softly. Cuisine. Not contamination. Not filth. Not evidence. Food. Ryan swallowed around a knot in his throat he had not expected. "Thank you," he said. Vivian seemed unsure what to do with that, so she only nodded. Then the display chimed again and opened a deeper biological comparison. This time, even Ryan could understand the headline. Deathworld baseline markers detected. The room went silent in a new way. Not offended. Not amused. Afraid of what the word baseline meant. Vivian's hand hovered over the screen. "Mr. Keller," she said quietly, "this report suggests your body treats environmental stress as normal life." Ryan thought about Iowa winters, summer heat, tornado sirens, black coffee before dawn, hot sauce on eggs, and his father saying the grill was not ready until it tried to scare you. He took one last bite of cornbread and said, "Doctor, with respect, you should see what we eat at breakfast." Vivian did not ask what humans ate for breakfast. She looked like she wanted to, but the council hall had already given her more answers than she was ready to hold. Claire Bennett took that silence and used it. She tapped her ring against the edge of her tablet. and the central display shifted from toxicology charts to a set of ordinary Earth images. No warships, no classified science, no military warning. Just a kitchen in Ohio with a little boy pouring maple syrup over pancakes while his father tried to keep the dog away from the table. A school cafeteria in Georgia where children traded apple slices for chocolate milk. A backyard in Arizona with burgers on a grill and paper plates stacked beside a cooler. A hospital break room in Boston where nurses drank coffee from foam cups at 3 in the morning, too tired to talk, but still passing around donuts because someone had remembered everyone else. The room watched without breathing. Ryan watched too, and somehow that was harder than eating in front of them. He had expected Claire to defend Earth with law, maybe with trade codes, maybe with some sharp diplomatic trap that made Vale look foolish. He had not expected her to show them breakfast. He had not expected to see a little girl in a yellow raincoat bite into a peanut butter sandwich while sitting on a school bus, her feet not even touching the floor. Vivian stepped closer to the display. Her voice was quieter now. These are juveniles. Claire looked at her. Yes. And these items are approved for them. Approved, packed, argued over, dropped on the floor, traded for cookies, and sometimes refused because children are children. A few translation lenses hesitated over that, then carried it across the hall. Ryan let out one breath through his nose. That sounded like home. Vale did not like the direction of the silence. He raised his chin, trying to turn ordinary life back into evidence. Ambassador, presenting sentimental images does not change the chemical facts. Claire turned to him with the kind of calm Ryan had seen in mothers who had already warned a child twice in the grocery store. No, counselor. It gives those facts context. You called our food poison because it would harm you. You called our families uncivilized because they are not built like yours. That is not safety. That is vanity. Vivian was not looking at Vale anymore. She had expanded one image of a child holding a cup of hot chocolate with both hands, smiling through a whipped cream mustache. Theobromine. Lactose, refined sugar, heat exposure, mild stimulant compounds. They give this to children as comfort. Ryan answered before Claire could. After sledding, sometimes. Or when they have had a bad day. Vivian looked back at him. A stress recovery ritual. Ryan shrugged a little. We just call it hot chocolate. The words seemed to bother her more than the data. Not in an angry way. In a personal way, like she was realizing how much her education had left out. She lowered her tablet. Your species takes hostile compounds, environmental hazards, microbial processes, heat, cold, bitterness, pain, and decay, then turns them into bonding rituals. Ryan thought about Thanksgiving tables, burnt marshmallows over campfires, chili cook-offs where grown adults argued like the fate of the county depended on cumin, and his mother sliding pie onto the porch for a neighbor who had lost his wife that winter. That sounds dramatic, he said. But yes, pretty much. Maya Torres folded her arms and added, we also put candles on cake and sing at it. Several delegates turned toward her, horrified and fascinated at once. Vivian blinked. Open flame. Maya nodded. Small ones. Ryan gave her a look. You are not helping. I am helping a little. For the first time all night, something almost human passed through the alien side of the room. Not laughter exactly, but the pressure broke. Then Vale ruined it. Enough. I will not sit here while Earth disguises contamination as culture. He pointed at Ryan's tray. That material will be seized. Claire's expression did not change. Ryan's hand stopped halfway to his coffee. Vivian turned slowly toward Vale, and the quiet that followed no longer belonged to him. Vale's order hung over the table like spoiled air. For a second, nobody moved, because everyone in that hall understood the difference between inspection and seizure. Inspection was procedure. Seizure was accusation. It meant Earth had brought something illegal into the council chamber. It meant Ryan Keller was no longer a guest at a cultural banquet. He was evidence. Ryan lowered his coffee cup slowly. His first instinct was not heroic. It was a plain, ugly spike of panic in his chest. He imagined the clip traveling back home, his mother seeing uniformed council officers haul away the food she had helped him pack, his father standing behind the diner counter with the television on mute, pretending not to care while every customer watched his son get treated like a smuggler. Ryan kept his face still because his face was all he had left. Claire Bennett stood before the security drones, even powered forward. No, she said. One word, calm as a locked door. Vale turned toward her, almost pleased to have a fight he understood. Ambassador, you are interfering with a lawful safety action. Claire opened her tablet and flicked a treaty page into the air. Article 12, Cultural Exchange Protections. Declared ceremonial materials may not be seized during a live diplomatic event unless they present active harm beyond the possessing delegation. She looked toward Vivian. Dr. Soar, does Mr. Keller's meal present active harm to anyone while it remains on his plate? Vivian's eyes moved from Claire to Vale, then to Ryan. The room waited for her to choose safety or truth. She chose truth. No, it does not. Vale's silver robe shifted as his hands curled at his sides. It is hazardous material. So is boiling water, Maya Torres said from the medical boundary. So is a kitchen knife. So is a campfire. Context matters. Several delegates glanced at one another, and Ryan could almost see the thought landing. Earth had not smuggled danger into the room. The council had dragged ordinary Earth life onto a stage and panicked when ordinary did not mean harmless to them. Vale tried again, colder this time. Dr. Soar, your duty is to the council. Vivian stepped between the security drones and the table. She was tall enough that Ryan had to tilt his head to look at her properly, blue-silver skin bright under the banquet lights, her tablet held against her chest like a shield made of data. My duty is to accuracy. Vale stared at her as if she had spoken profanity. Move aside. Vivian did not move. Let him finish. Ryan felt those 3 words in a place he had not expected. Not because Vivian was suddenly his friend. She was not. Not yet. But until that moment, every alien in the room had talked about him as a body, a specimen, a risk category, a digestive anomaly. Vivian was the first one to treat his dinner like it belonged to him. Claire turned slightly toward Ryan. Mr. Keller, are you still willing to continue? Ryan looked at the tray. 1 rib left. Half the coffee. The cornbread crumbs. The pickles shining in their little paper cup. And beside the thermal case, almost forgotten, a small round container wrapped in clear sealant. His mother's apple pie. He had saved it for after the speeches, back in his assigned quarters, where nobody would ask him to explain cinnamon like it was a crime. He picked it up carefully. His thumb brushed the label she had written in permanent marker, for Ryan. Share only with nice people. Ryan gave a quiet breath that might have been a laugh if the room had been kinder. My mom sent dessert, he said. The toxicology scanner caught the container before he opened it. New alerts appeared. Fructose concentration, spice oils, baked fat, caramelized sugars, mild acid, plant defense compounds. The hall tensed all over again, but this time the fear had changed. They were not laughing at human food anymore. They were watching it like a locked door on a planet they had never dared visit. Vale's voice dropped. Do not open that. Ryan looked at Vivian. Vivian looked at the scanner, then at Ryan. Slowly, she stepped farther in front of the drones. It is his food, she said. Ryan peeled back the seal. Warm cinnamon and apple rose into the air, soft and sweet. Nothing like a weapon, nothing like a threat. For a moment, he was not in the council hall. He was back in Iowa, standing in the diner kitchen while rain tapped the windows and his mother cut uneven slices, because she always said perfect pie looked store-bought. Ryan picked up the fork. His hand shook once, just once. Then he steadied it, took the first bite, and the whole galaxy watched Counselor Vale lose control of the room. The apple pie did what the barbecue, the coffee, and the hot sauce had not done. It made the council hall feel ashamed. Not all at once, and not in some grand wave of moral clarity. Shame came quietly, like people realizing they had been rude at someone else's dinner table. Ryan chewed the first bite slowly. The crust was a little soft from storage, the apples still sweet, the cinnamon stronger than he expected. It tasted like his mother had packed a piece of home and sent it 70 million miles because she knew official travel always made him lonely. The toxicology display kept flashing warnings, but the room had stopped obeying it. Nobody laughed. Nobody leaned away. Even the delegates who could not breathe the same air as cinnamon watched with a strange, careful respect. Vivian stood in front of the security drones, her tablet lowered at her side. The item presents no active threat, she said, before Vale could speak. The subject is stable. The cultural material remains under Terran control. Vale's face had gone pale beneath the silver tint of his skin. You have forgotten your place, Doctor. Vivian looked at him, and for the first time that night, her voice had no fear in it. No, Counselor. I remembered it. Claire Bennett stepped beside Ryan's chair, not in front of him this time, not to protect him from the room, but to stand with him in it. The Terran delegation requests that the council record be corrected. Vale forced a laugh that did not reach anybody. Corrected to what? That humans can survive poor judgment. Ryan set his fork down. He could have snapped back. Part of him wanted to. He wanted to tell Vale about school lunches packed by tired parents, church basements full of casseroles after funerals, firefighters eating chili from paper bowls, grandmothers measuring love in butter and sugar and second helpings. But he had learned something in the last few minutes. Some people were not changed by being beaten in an argument. They were changed by being left alone with what they had done. So Ryan only wiped his mouth with the napkin and said, "Corrected to say you were wrong." The words were plain, but they landed harder than anger would have. Vivian turned to the central display and entered the final classification herself. Common Terran food. Safe for human consumption. Hazardous to many non-Terran species without proper controls. Evidence of death world adaptation, not cultural negligence. A quiet pulse moved through the translation lenses as the record updated across the live broadcast. Somewhere, on Earth, Ryan knew his father was probably standing behind the diner counter with both hands flat on the stainless steel, pretending there was dust in his eyes. His mother would be mad that he had eaten pie on camera without warming it up. The thought almost broke him. Almost. Vale looked around for support and found only silence. The kind of silence powerful people hate most, because it does not belong to them anymore. Claire closed her tablet. "Counselor, Earth came here to share a meal. You tried to turn it into an indictment." She nodded toward Ryan's empty tray. "Now the galaxy has learned the difference." Ryan stood, gathering the little container and the napkin with ordinary care. Vivian stepped aside, allowing him to pass. But before he did, she spoke softly. "Mr. Keller, I owe your mother an apology." Ryan paused. There was still heat in his throat, still anger under his ribs, but it had changed into something steadier. "Then do it right," he said. "Ask for the recipe." Vivian blinked, then gave a small nod. Behind her, the great council chamber remained silent. Not because humanity had threatened it, not because Earth had shown a weapon, not because fleets had arrived at the edge of the system. It was silent because one man had sat down with the food his family gave him and refused to let strangers call it shame. Ryan walked out beside Ambassador Bennett with his shoulders tired and his head high. And across the galaxy, in homes and stations and ships that had never seen Iowa, people replayed the moment again and again, trying to understand how a simple meal had changed the way they saw an entire species. They had thought death world meant rage. They had thought strength meant domination. But that night, humanity taught them something older and harder to measure. Sometimes strength is just staying seated when the room wants you to shrink. Sometimes dignity is finishing what your mother packed for you. And sometimes the most dangerous thing about humans is not what they can survive, but what they refuse to let the universe take from them.